ขอขอบคุณทุกท่านที่เข้ามาในตอนนี้นะคะก็อันนี้ทางเจ้าหน้าที่เทคนิคอลได้แก้ปัญหาเรื่องของระบบ Zoom System ขออนุญาตรอโดยการเปิดดูวิดีโอพร้อมกันประมาณ7นาทีนะคะหลังจากจบวิดีโอเราจะเริ่มกำหนดการตามปกติค่ะขอบคุณทุกท่านค่ะ
As a human family, we've had an enormous wake-up call to how connected we are with a tiny little virus that comes along and shuts us down.
We all live in this world together. The same blood flows in me and any other person.
We're facing the challenges of an ecosystem that is stressed.
Things are not moving as fast as they should. Things are improving, but not as fast as they should.
The challenges that we are facing, they are materializing so fast that it's not only my children or grandchildren which will experience the consequences if we fail.
To do it, we need to do it together. Collaboration, north, south, east, west, black, brown, white. Strengthen the diversity of the human family is what we need right now to get us past this incredibly difficult time. Might sound like it's impossible, but that's what we work towards, making the impossible possible.
20 years ago, a small group of United Nations and business leaders came up with a visionary proposal.
I propose that you, the business leaders here gathered in Davos, and we, the United Nations, initiate a global compact of shared values and principles which will give a human face to the global market.
I always say part of Kofi Annan's genius was he invited business, but he also addressed civil society and labor organizations.
The mission of the United Nations Global Compact is to mobilize companies around the world to align their operations and strategies with 10 universal principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption.
The UN represents the body that aims to drive international cooperation and drive peace and security for humanity. And I think it unifies all of society around this set of 17 goals.
Our objectives cannot be met if the private sector doesn't play a fundamental role. And so the Global Compact is a platform in which all those businesses that abide by the principles and values of the United Nations and of the Charter to work together, representing the best of humankind.
For the last 2 decades, the initiative has grown to encompass local networks in more than 60 countries, engaging directly with over 10,000 companies.
The local networks are our global footprint around the world, and they work with us to translate the 10 principles as well as the Sustainable Development Goals into actionable pieces of work for businesses globally.
It is so decided.
Since 2015, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement have provided the most powerful common agenda that the world has ever seen, with an essential role spelled out for business.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
Any business that continues to operate under its own self-interest will not be around very long. So businesses that have a strong purpose, that understand how they can make society better, will be embraced by society and will be around for a long time.
Be the change that you want to see in business.
I truly believe that companies who do not put sustainability, the SDGs, in their strategies, they're going to disappear.
The mindset of consumers has changed. They increasingly want to buy from companies that are contributing to society as a whole.
Business must be part of the solution when we address these big global problems.
The focus has shifted to both the short term and the long term, both doing well and doing good, making profits and making a change. This is a reality of the world now. Leaders need to lead sustainably.
The United Nations Global Compact is leading the transformation ahead, challenging companies to take more ambitious action on the Sustainable Development Goals.
I think it's absolutely impossible to face the challenges of today, the very quick change that is happening without having the youth leading the way and helping us define the right strategies, the right policies, the right approaches to address the global problems.
The world is waking up, and change is coming whether you like it or not.
The world today has got more opportunities than it has the challenges that can be overcome by the opportunities that we have.
You find people in the most desperate of situations, determined to fight for a better future. That's the kind of world I want.
What have changed in a very short period of time is that the narrative is different, and that is fantastic.
If you want to have a good business, you have to mobilize people. A business is a sum of people working to something.
More and more people realize that sustainability is really about making the pie bigger, better, and more inclusive.
I hope in the future all businesses in the world will think about their own purpose. Business can only exist when they have a purpose.
We've got to show progress. We've got to reverse what's happening.
I see the Global Compact as an incredible organization working together with businesses to build a more sustainable world.
We are united across the globe, for the globe. We're united despite our challenges, no matter how daunting the task may seem.
Sawadee krab. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, members of GCNT, and interested participants. Welcome to the webinar, Meet the World's Race to Zero, Heroes for Climate Action. We are very sorry for the technical difficulty earlier, and we really appreciate you sticking around. My name is Poom Siraprapasiri from the Global Partnership Office for Sustainability and Communications at Jaran Pokapan Group, and also a member of the Global Compact Network Thailand, or GCNT's Environmental Working Team. It is my pleasure to conduct today's session. It's a very timely and relevant webinar on the topic of climate change for the Thai business community, following the recent release of the IPCC's 6th assessment report, and with only a few months to go until the COP26 in Glasgow later this year. The topics covered today are as follows. We'll start with the welcoming and opening remark by Khun Nopadon Det Udom, the Secretary General of GCNT and also the Chief Sustainability Officer of CP Group. Khun Gita Sabarawal, the UN Resident Coordinator in Thailand, and Khun Jens Rashinsky, Regional Lead from the UNFCCC and the IGES Regional Collaboration Centre for Asia and the Pacific. Then we will hear from Ms. Danielle McGallas, also from the UNFCCC, and Ms. Fiona Macklin from the Race to Zero campaign. They will provide an overview on the role of non-state actors, particularly the business sectors, in driving the world towards the goals of the Paris Agreement, and introduce the Race to Zero campaign, and also followed by Ms. Emma Watson, the SBTI's Senior Manager for Net Zero from CDP. And then we'll have a Q&A session so that the three speakers can answer questions submitted from the floor. Then in the second half of the webinar, we will learn from leaders of two very interesting, very innovative and progressive businesses. I'm pleased to introduce both Khun Dan Pathomwanit, the CEO of NR Instant Produce Public Company Limited, and Khun Mo Suttasini, co-founder of Happy Grocers, who will share the experience on this road to net zero. After that, we will hear from Mr. Tom Dowdle of CDP on the business ambition for 1.5 degrees Celsius. And Ms. Fiona Macklin will join us again to talk about the road to COP26 and the consultation process, Race to Resilience, and the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero. We'll then have another Q&A session for these four speakers. And finally, at the end of the next hour, Kun Marisa Panyashiwa from the UN Resident Coordinator Office will give a closing remark, concluding with our GCNT Executive Director, Kun Thanyaporn Titayavut, wrapping up the webinar. First, may I introduce Mr. Nopadon Det Udom, the Secretary General of GCNT and Chief Sustainability Officer of CP Group, to give a welcoming remarks. ขอเรียนเชิญคุณนพดลครับ
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings, Kun Kita Sabarawan, the UN Resident Coordinator in Thailand, Mr. Yen Rachinsky, the Regional Lead of UNFCCC, and thank you to all the speakers and participants of today's very timely and important session. Today we have opportunity to learn the latest development in climate change from international experts and business leaders. It's organized as a pre-session leading to the GCNT forum in October, also focusing on climate change. As many of you might have already learned, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, released its 6th assessment report 2 weeks ago, providing the latest assessment of the world's climate crisis. The UN Secretary General calls this report code red for good reasons. It should come as no surprise that the situation is very serious. The report concluded that human-induced climate change is already affecting many weather and climate extremes in regions across the globe. Human activities have heated up the Earth's climate at an unprecedented rate in at least the last 2,000 years. On average, the Earth has warmed up by 1.59 degrees Celsius on land, while our oceans have warmed up by 0.88 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial era. We are also the main driver of the decrease in glacier and Arctic ice, impacting our freshwater resources, rising sea level, and disrupting ecological balance of the marine environment. Stronger and more frequent evidence of extreme weather is around us. Heat waves, heavy rain, storm, as well as droughts and wildfires. These events have become more frequent and more intense because of man-made climate change. Another UN body also pointed out the close correlation between climate change and biodiversity. 500,000 to 1 million species are projected to be threatened with extinction, many within these decades. The mass extinction event, only the 6th in the last 100 billion years, is already underway. One very serious implication of global warming is acidification of the world's ocean, coupled with coral bleaching and loss of breeding grounds for marine life. And as the ocean is the major source of proteins for global population, a further collapse in marine biodiversity accelerated by man-made climate change will have devastating impacts upon all of us. So it's very clear that the world needs to come together and work harder on concrete actions, such as cutting back on our greenhouse gas emission and working towards net zero. GCNT have working with business organizations to encourage them to take leadership role in tackling the climate change through commitments, actions, and knowledge sharing. As we ramp up our actions, it's important for all of us in the Thai business communities to have a clear science-based picture and appreciate the same level of gravity of the situation. What is really going on? What do these technical terms mean in practical terms? Race to zero, net zero carbon versus carbon neutral, science-based targets, among others. What should businesses take into consideration if we want to participate in these global initiatives? Where do we go to for help if we want to understand it even better, how to measure our result. It is my sincere hope that the session today will enlighten us with better appreciation and ideas of how to take climate actions forward in our organization together. The session will prepare us for an even more fruitful conversations during the GCNT forum this year in October, aimed at rallying Thai businesses, climate actions and commitments. We have seen how much effort Thai businesses and all sectors of society have put toward coping with the COVID-19 pandemic. I strongly believe that to tackle the ongoing climate crisis, we will need even more effort, more commitment, and most importantly, more actions. Lastly, I'm honored to be surrounded by climate experts and thankful for their participation. We thank Ms. Kita and Kun Yen and their teams for making their presence possible, as well as co-hosting this event. I wish you all a productive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kun Nopadon. Next, I would like to ask Kun Gita Sabarawal, the UN Resident Coordinator in Thailand, to give an opening remarks. Kun Gita.
Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all of you. It's a great pleasure to co-host this important webinar on advancing the race to zero, together with the Global Compact Network Thailand, UNFCCC, and the team of the high-level champions. I'm delighted to be joining private sector and UN colleagues here today to decode the concept of race to zero, science-based targets, and what it takes for a business to be sustainable net zero emitter. As Kun Nopadol mentioned, we are in a critical phase given the scale of the crisis and the pace at which global warming is advancing. We will be affected by this, not in the remote future, but now in our own lifetimes. According to Deloitte's global survey conducted earlier this year, 80% of business leaders expressed concern about climate change. Simply put, the majority acknowledged that the world is at a tipping point, which demands collective responsibility to mitigate the consequences of increased emissions. At the same point, 2/3 of businesses reported cutting back on sustainability efforts in response to the pandemic and economic downturn. The slowing down of investments by the public and the private sector is not only impacting the prospects of spurring growth, but also the ability to scale up clean technology investments, which we are noticing in Thailand as well. Traditionally, environmental spending is seen as a cost burden to the economy, which is a fact when economic growth is contracting and impacting businesses negatively, as we see today. However, in a recently published IMF study, suggests that green spending can be a green multiplier, contributing to anywhere between 2 to 7 times more than conventional multipliers. This is precisely why it is so critical to create an enabling environment for a green economy and business sustainability. In Thailand, private sector, which generates nearly 9 in 10 jobs and contributes to 80% of the GDP, has an undeniable leadership role and responsibility. And I'm pleased that the private sector has taken such a bold initiative to be climate champions, with some companies already setting the bar high by aiming to be carbon neutral over the coming decade. With leadership from the private sector in setting climate targets will inspire all of us to be more ambitious ourselves, including our governments. The highly anticipated UN Conference on Climate Change, or COP26, is set to take place in Glasgow in just a few months' time, where governments will announce their emission reduction targets. My colleagues from the UNFCCC will be very busy supporting governments and other stakeholders in this process as the world rebuilds through a green recovery. Today's webinar is the beginning of a dialogue with the private sector to look at practical actions that are required to enable all of us to take steps to make the transformative changes in our businesses, which is no longer an optional add-on, but an
จะ
all-important
เพิ่มขึ้นไปแล้วแต่จริงๆถือว่าเป็นภาวะที่สำคัญอย่างยิ่งเร่งด่วนอย่างยิ่งถือว่าเป็น
transform Thailand into a green, sustainable, and competitive economy, given that our total carbon dioxide emissions constitute 0.7% of annual global emissions and a per capita emission rate of 4 tons, according to the emissions database for global atmospheric research. A change in trajectory is very much possible with these levels of emissions. I look forward to the impactful discussion today and hope you find it informative and inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kun Gita. And next, I would like to invite Mr. Jens Rashinsky, Regional Lead of the UNFCCC, as well as the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, or IGES, Regional Collaboration Centre for Asia and the Pacific. Kun Jens, please.
Thank you, Kun Pum, for giving me the floor. Sawadee krap, good afternoon and welcome to all participants of this webinar. And thank you very much for Kun Napadon and for Gita for your inspiring words. I'm very thankful for the GCNT and the UN Residence Coordinator Office for approaching us, the UNFCCC IGES Regional Collaboration Centre for Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok, and also our colleagues from the UN Climate Change Headquarters in Bonn, Germany, to support the private sector engagement on climate action in Thailand. Ambitious government commitments and country action is needed, but it is equally important that all sectors must do their part to achieve net zero emissions, boost climate mitigation and ambition action. Ahead of us lies a fundamental transformation of our economy, and the private sector needs to play a key role in accelerating global decarbonization through science-based target setting to reduce greenhouse gas emissions within their operation and value chains. As you probably know, the global community is preparing to engage in the COP26 meeting, the Global Climate Change Conference taking place in Glasgow in November this year. So in partnership with the GCNT and relevant climate experts, we are hosting this webinar as a technical session to build capacity for Thai business sector and GCNT members to have sufficient background information on all key aspects of climate change. So with this webinar, we want to encourage GCNT members and business sector to learn more about and to join climate-related campaigns such as the Race to Zero. In the next almost 2 hours, we would like to explain the role of the private sector. So we will hear from colleagues and from climate experts why the private sector is critical and how you can contribute. We will also explain the concepts. So you have probably heard about climate targets, commitments, pledges over the past months, such as net zero emission and climate neutrality, carbon neutrality. So in the following, we would like to introduce these concepts and the difference of these targets and what net zero emissions means for business. We are also happy that we have 2 company representatives with us, 2 Race to Zero members from Thailand to share experiences, especially on the benefits and opportunities of their companies found by taking ambitious climate action. And lastly, we will also introduce some available support and resources for climate action by private sector. So I'm very happy to see so many of you here today and such a great interest in the topic. I'm looking forward to the discussion today and also to the months and years ahead to continue our support for your climate action. The Race to Zero is certainly picking up speed, and I'm very optimistic that your engagement and participation helps creating the necessary momentum for climate action and will send a positive signal towards a successful COP26 in Glasgow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kun Jens, Kun Gita, and Kun Napadon. Now we move on to the first section of our webinar. Let us welcome Ms. Danielle Magalhães, Engagement Team Lead from the UNFCCC. Danielle will talk about the road to COP26 and the role of non-state actors, particularly businesses, What role can they play and should play in this global effort towards a better climate future? And Miss Fiona Macklin will follow with, she's the campaign coordinator from the Race to Zero campaign, and she'll tell us what this campaign is all about, why it was created, and how companies can join in. Daniela and Fiona, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pon. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you in Thailand, and I guess good morning to some other participants. I would like first to thank all the organizations that collaborated so that this event could happen today. We meet today at a time of great urgency, but also at a time of optimism and momentum with respect to global efforts to address climate change. 2021 is the most important year for the international response to climate change since the Paris Agreement, as we will move into this implementation phase of it. The IPCC working group report, which was already talked a little bit about it, which was released just a few weeks ago, clearly showed that we are on the red code of the climate emergency. Unless there are rapid, sustained, and large-scale reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees compared to the pre-industrial levels will be beyond reach, and that's quite scary. We are already seeing the impacts of the small change in temperature, with floods, heat waves, and fires. Therefore, we need to act fast, not to miss the point to keep the 1.5. For this, we will need all levels of society to work together, and that include all of us. One milestone to make this happen is the COP26 in Glasgow at the end of this year, where countries will be discussing further rules to implement the Paris Agreement, which must be a success to advance the climate talks into climate action. For COP26 to be this success, promises made must be promises kept, as our Executive Secretary, Patricia Espinosa, has been emphasizing on many occasions. The 2050 goal is only possible if nations take immediate steps now. And in this year, it is particularly important the submission of a stronger national plan and the pledge by developed nations to mobilize 100 billion annually. COP26 success is imperative for reestablishing trust and leadership in the climate change process. However, the viability of our societies doesn't depend only on leaders from governments and how they achieve the goals at COP26, but also on what is happening in the real economy, with business, cities, regions, investors, and civil society as a whole uniting behind policies, actions, and investments that will limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. Individual efforts from all non-state actors taking climate action is critical. Nevertheless, it's also important to coordinate actions from different players across economic systems to achieve a genuine step change in progress. This will in turn enable governments to go further and faster in their efforts to decarbonize, activating the positive ambition loop between state and non-state actors. To promote this collaboration, the high-level champions, Mr. Gonzalo Muñoz and Mr. Nigel Topping, who are appointed by the Paris Agreement to enhance climate action, have launched a framework of coalitions and initiatives. They are called Marrakesh Partnership. And since last year, they have launched a global campaign to help achieve this. Well, one is called Race to Zero and one is called Race to Resilience. The Race to Zero campaign, our main subject of the discussion today, has over 4,500 organizations among business, investors, cities, regions, and universities. This has sent a strong signal that non-state actors are united in meeting the Paris Agreement goals and creating a more inclusive and resilient economy. The rapid growth of commitments has also underpin that the transformation to a low-emission future is on the way, a future enabled by zero carbon recovery that will prevent future threats, create decent jobs, and unlock inclusive, sustainable growth. This journey toward a net zero emission future by 2050 requires that every business and investment decisions and decisions that we take on our day-to-day basis as individuals need to be through a climate lens. 1.5 degree is fundamental, but these long-term commitments must go hand in hand with concrete and credible short and medium-term actions, plans and targets, which allow the tracking and reporting of success so that innovations and solutions can be shared globally, in particular with actors in developing countries. Business models, asset owners, and managers need to be adjusted to achieve their targets in support of the goals of the Paris Agreement. Efforts to accelerate decarbonization remain key, and mitigation actions must be combined with adaptation practice to build resilience and tackle current and future impacts of climate change. Business must ensure their transition to net zero, must be a just transition which leaves no one behind by involving workers, consumers, and partners across the value chain in discussions on tackling this global challenge in a spirit of radical collaboration and implementing both measures to reduce the impact of job losses and industry phase out on workers and communities, and measures to produce new, green, and decent jobs for workers and healthy solutions for communities. In conclusion, the Paris Agreement is about collective goals. It is only by all of us working together that it can be realized. We can accelerate a sustainable transition to net zero, climate resilient, and a healthy future. To achieve this transformation, though, we need all of you on board. So thank you so much for being here today and doing this first step into the race. I hope you can join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. And up next, I think Fiona will just jump right in, right, Fiona?
Thank you so much, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I can only echo what Danny has said previously about the importance of bringing everyone together. It's a real honor to be here. Thank you so much to all our presenters who are with us today. Oops, sorry, I'm trying to get technology to work. And it's really wonderful to see so many of you coming to this presentation. Like I said, really echo the notes and comments that have been made throughout the first part of this presentation on the urgency required and the absolute need to underpin these commitments with action. So fantastic framing to this event, and it's a real privilege to be coordinating the Race to Zero and be able to dive into what this campaign means and how to join, how it's governed for you all today. As Danny previously really succinctly put, this is about rallying non-state actors under the leadership of our two champions, Nigel Topping and Gonzalo Muñoz, together under one umbrella in order to activate national governments. It's about this ambition loop that we've spoken about, but I see this as two ways. The non-state actors across the global economy are coming together and demonstrating to the national governments that they can and they are taking action. And so there's no time to lose for the national governments themselves. So that putting on the slight pressure to really accelerate action. On the flip side, it's also about demonstrating to these national governments that the infrastructure is there beneath them to facilitate that transition and make sure that we are all doing this in a just, fair and equitable manner towards not only a zero carbon world, but one that is resilient and equitable for everyone. This campaign, Race to Zero, was launched last year by the high-level champions, and it fits under the Climate Ambition Alliance, which is the alliance bringing together the most ambitious countries themselves in racing towards a zero carbon world. All actors within Race to Zero cover the global economy. So that's across sectors, across regions, across actor types. And it's been so exciting to see the momentum build, not just seeing the incredible acceleration of companies signing up, but seeing those financial, educational, healthcare institutions, seeing cities, seeing regions, seeing everyone across parts of the world recognize the urgency and the commitments needed to be made and come together to find solutions in a collaborative and radical collaboration manner. So who is in the race? So far we have over 700 cities, over 30 regions, well over 3,000 businesses, investors, education institutions, and our healthcare institutions, as I say, demonstrating this inclusivity and the recognition of the need to build towards this zero carbon world together. Those numbers in themselves also represent a really substantial part of the global economy, of total greenhouse gas emissions, and of our global population. And of course, we don't just stop there. The aim is to continue accelerating those numbers all the way up to and beyond COP26 in November. This slide is a really nice snapshot to indicate just how wide and how varied the campaign is and how much it spans across these different actor types that we've been talking about. I'll jump in a minute to how the campaign is governed and how we work with partner initiatives who themselves bring in individual organizations. But these partner initiatives that you can see on the slide are the ones that are leading the action, and they are working tremendously hard to make sure that Race to Zero continues to accelerate. As I mentioned before, Race to Zero is this umbrella campaign, and it's really fair to say that it is by no means a new initiative. It's not a new coalition. It's acting as this umbrella to bring together the already leading and phenomenally impressive initiatives and coalitions that are working towards this zero carbon future already. So how does it actually work? What does it look like? Race to Zero operates in the process whereby we work closely with those partner initiatives that you've just seen on the screen, and they act as secretariats almost through which they're funneling in individual organizations. So it's the partner initiative, the likes of Business Ambition for 1.5 or the SME Climate Hub for businesses, or Cities Race to Zero for cities, for example, who will apply as the partners into Race to Zero. Their partner applications are vetted by an independent expert peer review group. This is really important because it reinforces and establishes real objectivity and robustness in the criteria. So it makes sure that we might, as a Climate Champions team, really want a partner initiative to be involved because they have really wide reach and a really good reputation. But if they are not meeting the criteria as determined by this independent expert peer review group, they will not be let in until they meet the satisfactory requirements. So there's a separation in the application process to reinforce that robustness and credibility. Once those partner initiatives do join though, and if they do meet the criteria, then all their members themselves will also join Race to Zero through that partner initiative. And we really rely on the partner initiatives who are doing this phenomenal work to accelerate the action. We're talking a lot about criteria though and credibility. So how does this actually work and what does it look like? What does it mean to join Race to Zero through these partner initiatives? So we talk about the meta criteria of Race to Zero. All members joining Race to Zero through those partner initiatives have to meet our criteria. These criteria are divided into about 3 parts. So we have the 4 Ps, as we call them. These are to pledge at the head of organization level to achieve net zero as soon as possible. This is a real race mentality. We know that 2050 is the deadline set by science, but it's all about getting there as quickly as we possibly can. Within that, we also need to see a clear interim target. What are you going to achieve by 2030 to make sure that you're on that pathway to decarbonize as soon as possible? We also need to see a clear plan. It's about really demonstrating that every entity that joins Race to Zero has a clear plan as to how they will achieve both their short-term and long-term targets. And then they need to proceed. It's about taking immediate and meaningful action. It's no longer just about commitments. It's about making sure that those commitments are backed up by really impactful measures that are being taken from now to accelerate the transition. And finally, as Danny hinted to previously, it's about the importance of transparency in publishing. So we need all our members to publish on an annual basis on a public platform against their short-term and long-term targets to make sure that everyone can see the progress that is being made. Across those 4 Ps, and as the second part of the criteria, we need all our members to cover all scopes of emissions. So that's scopes 1, 2, and 3. And this is also about not including offsets as part of your emissions reductions targets. So we need all members of the campaign not to rely on offsets to decarbonise, but rather to focus on immediate abatement measures. And only once that state of reducing as much as possible is achieved, can members think about removing their residual or historical emissions to achieve that net zero state. Across all of these, we really want to see as well some leadership principles. So this is about a just transition. We want to see empowerment and equity across these commitments so that our members are not creating other issues just by addressing the climate crisis, and making sure that they're empowering those around them to transition in a really just and robust way. So with that, I will hand on back to the moderator, and really looking forward to hearing a bit more about the detail of how to actually put these commitments into action, thanks to our wonderful colleagues at the Science Based Targets Initiative.
Thank you very much, Fiona and Danielle. Thank you so much for your presentation. We'll come back to you at the Q&A session. And now let's hear from Ms. Emma Watson from CDP. She's the Science Based Targets Initiative Senior Manager for Net Zero, and she will talk about what net zero means for business. What are the science-based targets, and how can companies get started? As many of our participants are aware, there are many terms being used, floating around: climate neutral, carbon neutral, net zero, rate to zero, etc. Science-based target, of course. I'm hoping that you can provide some clarity about these terms. How do all these pieces fit together? Yes, please take it away, Emma.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the UN Global Compact Network Thailand. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. So I'm having a bit of my own technical issues, so sorry, my face is so big in the screen, but there we go. So thank you so much again. And yes, so my name's Emma Watson. I'm the Senior Manager for Net Zero at CDP, based in London, and the Science Based Targets Initiative. So my role at the Science Based Targets Initiative is to lead the development of the Net Zero Standard, and that's what I will be talking to you about today. So if we go on to the next slide, please. Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what are science-based targets, the SBTi's Net Zero Standard development process that we're going through at the moment, and then give a bit of an understanding about what net zero means at the company level. Next slide, please. Great. And again, thank you. So what are science-based targets? So first of all, I'll give a bit of a background on what the Science-Based Targets Initiative is. So we are an NGO that was formed just before the Paris climate talks in 2015. And we are actually a NGO made up of 4 different partner organizations. So we have representatives from CDP, which is where I'm from, the World Resource Institute, WWF, and the UN Global Compact. So again, it's great to be with our partners here today in Thailand to speak about science-based targets. And really, when the Science-Based Targets Initiative was formed, companies didn't really know how to translate global climate goals into action for themselves. So that's why we were formed, and that's kind of the aim of the initiative. And as of last week, we had 1,713 companies that had signed up to setting science-based targets. 858 of them have already set science-based targets, and we also have 715 commitments to align to 1.5C through the Business Ambition for 1.5 campaign, which my colleague Tom will be talking to you about later today. And these companies are very high impact companies. They span over 60 countries, nearly 50 sectors, and they have a combined market capitalization of over 20 trillion. So we have quite a large group of companies within the initiative. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So I'll now go on briefly to explain what science-based targets are. So science-based targets are short to medium corporate emission reduction targets that are in line with the level of decarbonisation, that's needed to keep global warming within 1.5 and 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. So really, they can be seen as a translation of global goals in the Paris Agreement into specific company goals. And really, the idea is that this will just show a company how much and how fast they need to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to stay within these temperature goals. Now, I've mentioned here that we do allow companies at the moment to set targets to align with well below 2C at the moment, which of course is what the original Paris Agreement, the maximum goal within the Paris Agreement. We've actually announced a new strategy as of a couple of months ago that we will no longer be allowing well below 2 degrees targets as of next year, and really ramping up the ambition to align with 1.5C. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So really, just to kind of recap, so we have the Paris Agreement goals, which are mitigation goals for the global economy. They're really long term, so we're looking at 2050 in that Paris Agreement goal, and it's expressed in a temperature metric. What science-based targets do is they translate that target and they make sure that they cover the most relevant emission sources for a company within its value chain. So not just looking at its own operations, but looking at its supply chain and its customers. And Fiona and Danny talked about the concept of kind of radical collaboration, and that's how science-based targets really spark that as well. Science-based targets in comparison to the Paris Agreement are a shorter time frame. So we are looking at a 5 to 15-year time frame for targets. But obviously, as I mentioned, the Paris Agreement looks at a longer time horizon. And science-based targets are expressed in metrics that are relevant for a company or a sector. So it may be as simple as a company reduces its emissions by 50% by 2030, or we may be looking at emissions per ton of steel or a ton of cement or something like that. So it depends on the company and what's relevant for them. So that's a bit about science-based targets. Now I'm going to talk about the net zero standard development process that we're going through at the moment. So if we go on to the next slide. So at the moment, there's been a huge surge in companies setting net zero targets, but at the moment, there's no global standard for companies to do this. At the moment, we have science-based targets, which are 5 to 15-year targets, and there is a standard for companies to be able to do that, but there's not for net zero. So because of that, we've seen a huge variety in what companies are committing to as part of their net zero targets. So the first area that we see differences in is the target boundary. So some companies might be including only CO2, others might be including all of their greenhouse gas emissions. And again, the other part of the target boundary that we see differences in is the scope of activities contained within it. So they may only be looking at their own operations, or they may be including, their supply chain and customers as well. So there's just a lot of variety in what companies are doing. The second key area that we see differences in is the mitigation strategies. So how are companies planning to actually achieve those targets? Some are including offsetting, some are not, some are going 100% absolute zero. What is the right thing to do? So that's what we're trying to figure out. And then again, the time frame is something that we see huge differences in. So some companies have said in 2020 they were net zero, and some others are looking to 2050, for example. So what's the right time frame for companies to be looking at for net zero? So if we move on to the next slide, please. So at the moment, we're going through a process to try and address this huge amount of heterogeneity in the space of net zero. So last year, we came out with a foundations paper, which really spells out the concepts of net zero. We then convened an expert advisory group, which is a group of about 30 different representatives from academia, science, business, and we convened that group of experts to try and work with us to develop, okay, what are the criteria? What does a company need to do? So after we worked with that group, we did come up with a set of criteria that went to public consultation at the beginning of this year. And then we started to write guidance, which is currently being tested by companies at the moment in the net zero road test. So if we go on to the next slides, I've kind of explained this already, so I won't spend too much time, but essentially this is the process that we're going through. And as you can see, we're nearing the end of the process. So we're coming to the end of the road test with companies. We will go into a second public consultation in September, which you can also take part in and provide your feedback to us, which would be amazing. And then we will be launching the standard 2 weeks before COP in October. So that's coming up quite quickly. We will then actually start validating net zero targets as of January 2022. So that won't happen until next year. So if we move on to the next slides, I'm going to just talk you through. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. Great. Okay, fantastic. So now I will quickly talk you through what it means at the company level to reach net zero. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. Great. So if we're trying to understand net zero at the global level, we're currently in a situation where there's an imbalance between the amount of greenhouse gases emitted and the amount of emissions that are coming out and being sucked out of the atmosphere. So essentially, we're in a state of global warming because of this imbalance. So in order to stop climate change, we really need to get to a point that you see here on the right, where the sinks and sources of emissions are balanced out and that we're removing any additional carbon from the atmosphere. So what you can see here in this graph is on the left-hand side, you've got this huge amount of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions in the black. And really what we want to do is get those emissions down to the very lowest levels possible and then balance it out with sinks of carbon dioxide, so pulling the carbon out of the atmosphere. So if we move on to the next slides, please. So what we're trying to do within the net zero standard is figure out what it means for a company to reach net zero. So in this diagram that we see here, this company is reaching net zero at 2040. So I'll explain this in the next few slides. So if we go on to the next slide, please. Great. So why does this company's approach to net zero fit within the net zero framework? So the first thing that the company is doing is they're setting what we're calling near-term science-based targets. So these are 5 to 10-year emission reduction targets to reduce value chain emissions in line with limiting to 1.5C. So that's that yellow line that you can see there on the graph. So in this example, the company is reducing its value chain emissions by 50% by 2030 in line with 1.5C. So this is really, really important because we need to know that we're taking the right actions in the short term to be able to reach net zero in the longer term. So that's the very first step that a company needs to be taking. Now, if we move on to the next slide, please. Great, thank you very much. So the next element of a net zero target is having a long-term science-based target. So this is looking out into the future, and it's how much the company needs to reduce its emissions to be consistent with what's required at global net zero in a 1.5C scenario. So if you think back to a few slides ago, the big black bucket of emissions that was reducing down into the very small black bucket of emissions, that's what we're trying to achieve here. So how much does my company need to reduce to be in line with global net zero? So in this example, the company is reducing its value chain emissions by 90% by 2040. And that's in line with the level of decarbonisation that's needed at global net zero. So that's the second element. Now, if we move on to the next slide, please. Great. Then at the point of net zero, which you can see by this blue diamond that we have in the screen, this is where at the point where companies, once they've reduced their emissions as much as possible, then they should neutralize emissions that cannot be eliminated. So in this example, the company is reducing its value chain emissions to a level that's consistent with net zero. So that's about 90 to 95%. And then they are perhaps purchasing offsets that could be, for example, afforestation, that type of thing, that will suck carbon out of the air. And then the company will then reach net zero. But it's not until they've reduced their emissions to that point that they can claim net zero. So if we move on to the next slide, please. And then the other part of the puzzle, which is where I think we hear a lot of the terms like climate neutrality, carbon neutrality, that type of thing. So in the transition to net zero, companies are encouraged to compensate for remaining emissions. So that could be through purchasing high quality carbon credits and also other things like investing directly into projects. So in the transition to net zero, we do encourage companies to invest outside of their value chain in climate mitigation. However, it shouldn't take away investment in reducing their own emissions first. That should always be the first step for a company. So I think that it could be the last slide. So if we just pass on to the next one, please. Great. Yes, so that's my presentation. And yes, thanks again to everyone so much for having me and for listening today.
Thank you so much, Emma. And I believe that was very helpful for our audience and to me as well personally. Next, we'll go on to the Q&A section. Unfortunately, because of the earlier technical difficulty, we have to keep the Q&A quite short. And I understand that we have a few questions coming from the audience as well as from the pre-submitted questions. This one is for everyone, but let us start with Daniela first. What is your expected outcome from COP26 and how would they impact private sectors?
We have to be, thanks, Bill. We have to be very positive here. So my expected outcome is that we are finalizing all the rules for the implementation of the Paris Agreement at that moment, which will include rules related to the mechanism, rules related to transparency, but also some according moments in relation to finance and how this will happen for developing countries. So I'm very positive that this will occur. On the other hand, I think what is important here and what we have been trying as supporting the champions and supporting the Marrakesh partnership is showing to parties, to the countries, to their governments at COP26 that all this has been advanced already, and business, investors, the civil society is ready to step in and help the parties to move on and ensure the Paris Agreement is implemented and ensure that we can achieve its goals. So I think what is important here from the business side is that we need to bring their voices into COP26 and show that it's possible to parties and show that the positiveness of this is taken by parties while implementing, while discussing towards the implementation of COP26. And this will make a real success for COP26 in Glasgow.
Thank you, Dani. Anyone else who would like to take that question? What's your expectations from COP26? Fiona or Emma?
Happy to jump in very briefly and again echo everything that Dani said. And in terms of expectations, I would add the real emphasis on the radical collaboration that is really promoted within Race to Zero, but has to go, of course, beyond and looking to tackle this crisis, not individually in all our silos, but absolutely together, because we can provide each other with solutions, we can provide the support necessary. We've seen, for example, when companies are committing to net zero and have to commit across all 3 scopes of emissions, one company's scope 1, their direct emissions, will be another company's perhaps scope 3. So it's really important to make sure that that interconnection is really fluid and that we are providing that support as necessary. The other thing to add to Danny's point is that I think this is really a moment of opportunity for leadership, and I think COP26 will be a fantastic and needs to be a really important turning point from this notion of commitment and building momentum to really accelerating the implementation and the action. And we'll see that the leaders who are taking that initiative and really taking the action now will emerge as the leaders of tomorrow and even of today, as we need them to be, and demonstrate all the benefits from this ambitious action.
Thank you, Fiona. We have a lot more questions actually, so but we have a little bit of time left. Let me ask Emma, what would you recommend to companies that are already committed to net zero, while the region or country that they're in have not? That means that there's almost no incentive nor penalty to encourage investments in greenhouse gas reduction. So if the company is committed, but they're not in a jurisdiction that really pays attention to emission reduction, so what can they do?
So yeah, that can be a bit of a tricky one, I think. And I think if I were that company and trying to think about, okay, what are the things that I can do to perhaps, get this on the government's agenda? So perhaps looking at other companies that have made similar commitments as well, perhaps looking at peers within your industry as well, and seeing how you can come along on that journey as well. It's incredibly important that the government does listen to, businesses within their country. And if the company is actually leading the way on these topics, then they should be able to work with them to do that. So it is a bit of a tricky situation, I think, when there isn't the kind of advantages that you have within countries that do have those
ในประเทศที่จริงๆแล้วเนี่ยมีภาคธุรกิจที่เป็นผู้นำอยู่แล้วแต่
other companies in a similar situation and working together to move that forward would be my best advice. I don't know, perhaps if Fiona might have some advice on that question as well. But yeah, that would be my advice in that situation.
Thank you so much. Would Fiona like to jump in, or we have to wrap up? Unfortunately, we didn't because we ran late at the beginning. So, but we'll forward all these questions. There are many good questions actually to our speakers, and hopefully they'll cover some of them, and we'll post the questions and response on our website, on the Global Compact Network Thailand website later. So look for the link in the chat box that we'll share afterward. So thank you very much to all the 3 of you. And I understand that Fiona will stick around for the last segment. And let's come back to experts in Thailand. We have 2 business leaders, Kun Dan Pathomwanit, the CEO of NR Instant Produce Public Company Limited, or NRF, and Kun Mo Suthasini, co-founder of Happy Grocers. So let me start with Kun Dan. Kun Dan, your company is remarkable, right? In many ways, it's a purpose-driven company. I think it's the first listed on the SET, right? The Stock Exchange of Thailand, that is purpose-driven. And I like that purpose very much, right? I believe it's to decarbonize the world through food. And I also think that plant-based food will expand very rapidly. So could you please tell us why NRF has taken this path and also joining the Race to Zero campaign? What are the challenges and opportunities that you face? Kun Dan Kap.
Sure. Good afternoon or good morning to everybody, wherever you are. So let me share screen. I have a very short presentation to show everybody. Okay, I know we're short on time, so I haven't timed myself, but I'll try and keep this within the allotted time. So our company, NRF, we're listed on the Stock Exchange of Thailand. Our purpose really is to decarbonize the world with food. And we're a food manufacturer. And so what does that mean? Hold on here, sorry. So if you look on the right-hand side, what we're very focused on is at the intersection between human health, planetary health, technology, and decarbonization. And we have three primary verticals: ethnic, functional, alternative proteins, and e-commerce, each playing a synergetic role and symbiotic relationship between the three. And so when we look at it from a business model perspective, so the first thing is, because we're very focused on alternative proteins, both as food and for agriculture, our supply chain, our upstream controlled, directly controlled ingredients are decarbonizing in itself. The second is our value chain is really based around the UN SDG goals, and 10 goals in total that we've adopted. The third is we're building a global network of carbon neutral facilities to produce our products. That will also help in our Scope 3 emissions without having to actually transport goods. So these facilities supply within region. The next is really purpose-led brands and co-manufacturing. So we offer everything that we do from a sustainability perspective and a carbon footprint perspective to our OEM clients. And then the last is basically global omni-channel distribution or through e-commerce to basically further reduce our carbon footprint in terms of selling product. And so if you look at how we report our business, looking at the left-hand side, so our business today is carbon neutral, and we're carbon neutral 2 years in a row. Our top executives are carbon neutral, including myself. However, because of our ingredients, we actually, what we're focusing on is how can they become carbon negative businesses. And so, for example, the production of mung bean and different ingredients that would replace, carbon emitting ingredients in our products. And so that's basically comprised of two things. So carbon reducing products, and then on the bottom, it's basically carbon removal from operations to supply chain. And then we then report our performance more in line with as a public company across triple P, so people, planet, and performance, as you can see. And so one of the reasons we immediately jumped on net zero is really around strategy. And so because of our purpose, we have three foundational strategies in terms of reaching net zero. And so on the left-hand side, as you can see, is carbon governance. And so how do we as a company align with our purpose, all the way down from our corporate purpose down to our product purpose. The second is around our production, and how do we do from abatement and reduction and then eventually removal of carbon within our core directly controlled operations. And then the third is basically competitiveness. We view basically net zero as actually a new S-curve. For some of you who don't know what that means, it's almost like a blue ocean in the sense that we're now aligning our actual operations and our business around decarbonization, which is why we are very eager. We know it's a tough battle, but we believe that by being able to get to net zero, that this is a value proposition both for our B2B and our B2C clients. And so, so why do we commit to net zero? So one, as I mentioned, it was because of this new S-curve. Two, it aligns with our purpose. Three is, as I mentioned, competitiveness, as trying to be a global leader. And what that means is we want not just our company, but our products. When we start carbon labeling all our products, right, to be the most competitive in terms of our carbon footprint for our products. Third, when we, as a public company, we want our company to sit within fund managers' portfolio as a way to basically carbon neutralize their portfolio. In addition, we found that by embracing these type of, I would say, these big, hairy, audacious goals, it also helps in terms of employee attraction and loyalty. And we feel that our employees are very passionate in what we do. And lastly, and this is something we've said over the past 2 to 3 years since our IPO, is that it's all about future-proofing our business ahead of regulatory reform. And I believe with the IPCC report that was released last week, we are definitely future-proofing our business as this change becomes even more imminent. And then I would say the last thing is this is an imperative, and we just have to do it as a company. Okay, and so in terms of basically, some of the challenges, I think this is still a lesson in progress. And so, the first challenge is for us really as a public company, is investors, they like the sustainability angle if you're looking at the very top bullet, but they don't attribute value to what we do, to our purpose, to triple bottom line reporting. I hope that financial flows, going to my second point, will rewrite what's going on. And I believe that investment flows really is ground zero if everybody here in this group really wants to get everybody aligned with net zero. I mean, there has to be kind of a revision around how companies are measured. And the next challenge is obviously convincing and incentivizing Scope 3 suppliers. So within this context, what we're trying to do is eventually, as we go, as we generate revenue from these carbon negative business activities, it will create accretive income that we can then provide as incentive to Scope 3 suppliers. But still, sometimes it's difficult, especially if they're very small SMEs who don't even understand the science or the impact of climate change. Oftentimes when we're dealing with farmers, even when you say that their pesticides, the chemicals involved in planting is a threat to their family, they said, a lot of responses that we get from farmers is, well, they're going to die anyways. So, forget global warming, forget cancer, they just want income. So I think this is one of the issues that we're also contending with in terms of our upstream agriculture supply chain. The next is our stakeholders in terms of convincing them that to try to, think past just primary earnings and then think about how this will affect our business from an upside perspective and then earnings eventually down the road. As if you compare our company to our peers, we're basically operating on a higher cost model because of what we're trying to do. I think the last is, with information and awareness, I think the imperative of climate change and, the realization that we must adopt net zero is just not great enough from an awareness perspective. I have a video, I don't think we have time, but you'll see it in the next slide. I won't play the video. But we're actually trying to do that in our mission. And then, the last is kind of how do we calculate this, right? Whether it's based on, a cost basis or averaging in terms of how do we calculate and how we truly get to net zero. And so here you can see, and I'm ending with this slide. The BTS ran this video. It's a 1-minute video talking about climate change and, the imperative for adopting low carbon foods. We're very happy about this. It reached 4 million people per week together with VGI. And this is the small role that we're trying to play in this regard. Okay, that was almost okay. That was a little bit over, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dan. That was very inspirational. And actually, you answered a lot of the questions that we have already, especially on the challenge of working with suppliers, right? Convincing them on, this is important, this is a long-term thing, right? When a lot of them, a lot of us, are trying to address our short-term needs, right? Especially right now. Let me move on to Kun Mo Suthasini from Happy Grocers. I must admit that at first I did not know much about Happy Grocers, but after looking at your business, I would really like to become a customer. You connect farmers and producers who produce food, fruits and vegetables, meat and cheese in an environmentally friendly way to end consumers. Can you tell us more about your business and its climate ambition, and what have you learned on this journey so far? Kun Mo, please.
Hi, for some reason I cannot share the video, but okay. I would like to share the presentation. 1 second. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Mo, and I'm the co-founder of Happy Grocers. And I would like to share a little presentation with you before we jump to any questions. One second. So hi, everyone again. So we are Happy Grocers, and we are basically a startup that tries to connect small farmers all over Thailand to customers in the city. And we started in March last year in the middle of the COVID, and we were really set off to make food supply chains as transparent as possible so that customers can make the best decision for their health, the producers, and the planet. So our story started when we discovered that agriculture is actually one of the biggest contributor to climate change. And as you can see from this picture, there's a lot of farmlands that are prepared to be performing the monoculture around this area. And then we were just wondering what it would be like if we can duplicate this kind of model of the farm that you see in the circle to more lands in Thailand, which is a farm where farmers would avoid the use of chemical fertilizer or chemical pesticides as much as possible, or farms that really practice actively the permaculture. And this is actually the farm we're working with right now in Supanduri. We thought that the best way to find out what would be the best way to really motivate farmers to shift the way they do agriculture is to really talk to farmers. And we really spend as much time as possible as we can to really get to know every single farmer that are working in our network in the personal level, to really understand not only what they value, but also what actually would motivate the action to move towards sustainable agriculture as well. And from these many talks and also really long research that we have been doing since last year, we discovered that one of the main reasons why farmers are using a lot of chemicals in the way they do farming is because the demand from the market really want products that look perfect, and also products to be available all year long, which really go against the nature. And the second thing, which is a really big problem, is that over 40 to 50% of the producers are actually they are thrown away to the landfill even before they are entering the supermarkets because they just don't reach the spec and are not beautiful enough. And this is when we thought that what if we create a market that basically provide products that do not have chemicals, products that are really from sources that are sustainable, from organic, from permaculture, and also products from SMEs that also value the same thing as us. For example, chocolate that might be from farms that are in Thailand, or cheese that are made from Thai milk. And we basically thought that maybe we can create happygrocer.co, where it is an online farmers market that people can come and basically shop for products and make impact at home. And this is not just any website, but it is really a movement that we are creating right now, where we don't only just provide a convenient access for people to get the product, but also an education that's really digestible, really easy to understand for people to learn more about where food comes from and why is it that organic products always look funny. Sometimes they are too big, sometimes they are too small, sometimes they are distorted, to really get people to understand about what actually would be the consequences in terms of looks, and also consequences in terms of the kind of product that you are supporting to the farmers and also to the environment as well. You might be able to find products that look funny like this in our store that you might not be able to find in supermarkets, because the standard that we use to select our product really include products that looks funny, too big, too small, because at the end of the day, we really value the production process over the look. And this is the natural look that we really embrace at Happy Grocers. And for the past almost 2 years, we are able to help our farmers reduce over 80% of things that they could have thrown away before they worked with us, because we really enable farmers to sell more of the products that might not look perfect. And you will also be able to experience the kind of deliveries that look like this, where we really value the packaging that are able to be composted. So for example, things like banana leaves and paper bags, paper boxes, and also we really have the recycling program for things like egg trays and also bottles and jars as well. And the most exciting thing about the whole value chain that we have is that we are also working on a solution to enable our consumers to be able to compost their food waste as well, which should be launched really soon, which we will be announcing on our social media really soon. So throughout the past almost 2 years, something that we created is not only demand for things that are sustainable, that would really drive the motivation of farmers to shift to organic farming and no chemicals farming. We also create a community of consumers who are really conscious about the impact that they create on a daily basis through food as well. And it really become a movement here in Bangkok where people start to question more about where food comes from and also start to think about their impact on a daily basis as well. And lastly, I would like to end with a little diagram to summarize our value chain. So things that are really, really important to us are including how do we create a model that really reduces food waste, and also how do we really avoid the use of plastic packaging. And another thing is also to how do we create a model that if one day we get bigger, we would also be able to support our small community like the way we used to, like the way we are doing now as well. And that's the reason why when it comes to product selection, we choose to work with small farmers in Thailand because we really value the economic development of rural part of Thailand. And we also would select the product that look not too perfect as well, some too big, some too small. And then we send these products to our headquarters in Bangkok and then package it in a way that they would be in eco packaging and also would be implementing these returnable policy as well, and then deliver this to our customers and also offer them an option to be able to compost their food waste and then send this food waste back to our farms. So that is it for Happy Grocers today. If you'd like to follow more of our stories, please feel free to check out our social media or happygrocer.co. Thank you so much.
Thank you both, Cap. That was very exciting and very inspirational. You don't need to be like a huge, multi-billion-dollar business to take concrete actions to help address the climate crisis. Before we go to Q&A with the two of you, there's one more session. Let us turn now to our next expert, Mr. Tom Dowdle from CTP. He is the Business Ambition for 1.5 campaign lead, and I believe you're here to tell us about the support and resources that companies that want to make commitment and take actions on climate change. So Tom, please tell us what the Business Ambition for 1.5 campaign is about and how it relates to the Race to Zero campaign.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Amsterdam. Yes, I'll explain a little about the Business Ambition for 1.5 degree campaign, which is the leadership campaign of the Science Based Target Initiative. I know it can sometimes be confusing, science-based targets and then Business Ambition for 1.5. How does that relate to Race to Zero? How can companies get involved? So I'm just going to give a brief overview on how companies can participate and what is required, and also what it means for participation in Race to Zero, and then Fiona can pick up on more of the details. So why Business Ambition for 1.5? Business Ambition for 1.5 campaign was launched in 2019 after the IPCC 1.5 degree report as basically a way to ensure that companies were stepping up to setting 1.5 degree targets at the highest level of ambition in science-based targets, and also doing more than setting their own targets, also committing to support advocacy and showing their support for 1.5 degree aligned climate policy, and also signposting the way to committing to set a science-based net zero target when the guidance was ready. When we launched it in 2019, we hoped to have 100 companies. We've now got a lot further than that and made a lot of progress, but we still need more. We're still, in the climate emergency, and we really need more companies stepping up and showing that they're ready to play their part in creating solutions and set ambitious targets. business ambition for 1.5 is an SBTI campaign, but we're partnering with the United Nations Global Compact and the We in Business Coalition to drive as much ambition as possible from the global business community. So next, please. So we're in the couple of months before COP. What we're really pushing as many companies as possible is to join the race to zero, increase those numbers that Fiona talked about, and to do that via the Business Ambition 1.5 degree campaign, really join SBTI and make a commitment at the highest level of ambition possible. Emma already discussed a little bit about what is science-based targets. So now we'll go into a little bit more detail about how you can join the leadership campaign of science-based targets. So next slide, please. So how many companies do we have? Where are they? We have currently 715 companies in the campaign, and all those companies in the campaign have committed to set 1.5 degree science-based targets and or a net zero target before 2050. In Asia particularly, we have over 90 companies and growing fast, and it's an area where we really want to increase the number of sign-ups. So it's great to have this opportunity to talk to you all today. As you've already heard, CP Group and PF Instant Produce are both in the campaign. So it's great to have two large Thai companies already committed to the campaign, and we would love to have more in the coming months. You can see there's a lot of European companies and North American companies, a growing number in Asia and a growing number in Latin America as well. The next slide, please. So how do you do it? This is the public commitment letter that all companies sign to take part in the campaign. It's a short document, but it's quite a detailed document. So we'll go into a little bit of the details, but essentially by signing this commitment, organizations are signing up to set science-based targets, but also join the race to zero. And also there's full support and guidance for companies on how to set science-based targets, a step-by-step guide, lots of criteria and recommendations. It is a complex process, but there's a lot of supporting documentation available on the SBTI website and also available from the partner organizations. Also, in addition, the extra thing that companies commit to, we encourage companies to take policy advocacy positions consistent with a 1.5 degree future and support increased climate action from governments, which is also going to be critical for COP26 and beyond. Next slide, please. So what do you commit to? There are two options in the commitment letter. Commitment one is setting 1.5 degree science-based targets across all scopes in your target, in line with the science-based target recommendations. Option two is to commit to set a net zero science-based emission reduction target no later than 2050 with interim science-based targets. As part of that, we have a number of companies who've ticked one or two. We also have over 300 companies that have ticked option one and option two, so committing to the highest level of ambition for short-term targets and long-term targets. So next slide, please. So here is quite a detailed slide. I won't go into all the details here, but I believe the slides and the information will be circulated. But here's a little look at what exactly are in the two options. As Emma noted, option two, you can currently set two levels of ambition for your long-term SPTs and net zero target. However, as a way to increase ambition, SBTI will be moving to only 1.5 degree targets from July 2022. So we're really encouraging companies now to to tick option 1 and option 2 and commit to 1.5 degree short to medium term targets in addition to a net zero target. So next slide, please. Yes, here is basically, it's a quick and easy process to sign the commitment. If you sign the letter and send it to us, basically, normally within a week, you can get an answer and enter into the campaign, be listed on the UN Global Compact website, also on the SBTI website as a committed company. You'll also be highlighted on the Race to Zero website as a member company. So it's a really good way to show publicly that you're committed, you're part of Race to Zero and committed to SBTI. Next slide, please. It's being a little bit slow. Here we go. So yeah, that profiling is not only something that SBTI does and the UN Global Compact and the Women Business Coalition, but we're also working closely with the UK government. So there's an example here from Alok Sharma, the president of COP26, congratulating large Japanese companies. I think
บริษัทญี่ปุ่นขนาดใหญ่นะคะแล้วก็ล็อกชาร์มาเนี่ยนะคะก็ได้ทวีตถึงนะคะบริษัทต่างๆนี้ที่เข้าร่วม Race to Zero แล้วฉะนั้นมันมีโอกาสอย่างยิ่งที่ทุกคนจะได้รับเนี่ยนะคะการชูนะคะว่าคุณเป็นบริษัทที่เข้าเป็นร่วมนะคะการทำงานนะคะในระดับสากลนี้นะคะและสามารถที่จะร่วมเป็นส่วนหนึ่งนะคะ
September, that would be great. We're also organizing as SBTI and Business Ambition 1.5 and Race to Zero a global day of action on the 1st of October for all companies who are part of the campaign to really show what they're doing and call for more action and ambition ahead of COP26. So that's on the 1st of October. And of course, as mentioned, COP26 will happen at the beginning of November, and that's when we'll culminate the campaign and show our total number and the commitments for companies. So really would urge all companies here today, if at all possible, to make that commitment. I'm happy to help out with any questions. I've answered a few questions in the chat, and also colleagues here, Race to Zero and others, happy to help companies make that commitment wherever possible, and hopefully get to more than 800 companies and increase the number of Thai companies in the campaign. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. And finally, welcome back, Fiona, for the last real talk. Fiona, I understand that you have a few more topics, right? On the Race to Resilience and the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero. So can you take it away? What are they about? What are they trying to do, and how can companies support it? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm very conscious of time, so I'll keep this very brief, just to say, following on from Tom, that really echo that call to action. Business Ambition 1.5 is absolutely leading in our Race to Zero campaign. So it would be wonderful to see more Thai companies joining that. I'm just going to wrap up really briefly by saying, with regards to looking forward and looking beyond COP26 with Race to Zero, we are currently undertaking our public consultation on the future of the campaign, and this will very much help us shape and sort of form the new architecture of Race to Zero moving forward. We really want to shift the focus more from mobilization and commitments into implementation, as has been the theme of this event today. So we will really be looking forward to bringing all our members and all our partners into that new focus. And would very much welcome your thoughts if you have ideas of how to continue strengthening and enhancing the campaign. So perhaps I can ask that link to the public consultation be circulated after the event. Of course, it's not just about mitigation. We've heard a lot about Race to Zero and how to join, how to focus on decarbonising, but we know that mitigation has to go hand in hand with adaptation and resilience in order to ensure this just transition. And that is why our high-level champions earlier this year in January launched the sibling campaign to Race to Zero called Race to Resilience. And this campaign really sets out to catalyse a step change in global ambition for climate resilience, very much putting people and nature first, pursuing a resilient world where it's not just about surviving these climate shocks, but really thriving in spite of them. So what it aims to target, we're looking to catalyse action by non-state actors to build the resilience of 4 billion people from vulnerable groups and communities around the world to climate risks. And then by 2050, the aspiration is to be living in a world where all these communities thrive in the face of multiple risks and are really equipped to face the challenges posed by climate change. So it's very similarly structured to Race to Zero in the sense that entities and initiatives that join the campaign have to meet 4 Ps as targets. Sorry, actually 3 Ps for Race to Resilience. So we've got the pledge part. So companies need to pledge to translate existing and new targets whether directly or indirectly, into the numbers of people from vulnerable groups and communities who will be made more resilient by that initiative and by that entity to climate risks. They need to plan, so to really use the best knowledge and scientific evidence to share a clear plan to take action towards this commitment with interim targets again and interim milestones, and take immediate action, again that precedes third P, to pursue commitment in support of race resilience with active and sort of a functional hub that's able to request and monitor members. So a similar governance process whereby initiatives are bringing in the individual members. That's race resilience, and we're really looking to kind of gather again actors across society, different actor types, cities, regions, companies, universities to join this campaign, and really actively encouraging those that join Race to Zero to take part in race to resilience as well. We also know, of course, that building adaptation and resilience needs funding. So again, that is why Race to Zero and Race to Resilience are paralleled by a third campaign launched by the high-level champions called the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero, also actually launched by Mark Carney. The idea here is really to translate what finance is doing into the real world, and it's this dual goal of transitioning finance to net zero. We know that entities within the finance sector have to commit to net zero themselves and take action to get to net zero, but it's also about financing the transition, using finance and the finance sectors across the board to help cities, regions, companies also achieve their net zero targets and build resilience. So the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero was launched to do both those things. It currently unites over 170 firms across the financial sector, providing this forum for better coordination. Again, it's about the sense of bringing actors together, creating that collaboration rather than each of us working in silos, in order to mobilize the necessary funding for this transition. So very specifically, GFANZ, as we call it, so that's the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero, aims to broaden Race to Zero's existing finance campaign. So we do have financial initiatives and entities within Race to Zero, but this GFANZ campaign is to really bring those all together to ensure that all the different subsectors of the financial sector have really credible net zero commitments in line with the Race to Zero criteria. It's going to raise ambition, making sure that those commitments are backed by robust targets and really clear transition plans. It's going to coordinate these commitments and actions across the sector to really support this economy-wide transition needed to achieve net zero, and really making sure that we're bringing together different actors to provide analytical tools, infrastructure and support across all these financial institutions to help implement these net zero strategies. It's also going to support the technical collaboration on a really substantive and kind of cross-cutting issues that accelerate the alignment of investment and lending with net zero. So again, this aspect of, it's not just the operations of the financial organizations, but really what are they investing in, what are they lending to? And finally, it's about also showcasing the efforts, the collective efforts and achievements of the sector. So GFANZ will be used to promote what is happening and the impact achieved through that campaign in order to make sure that we're attracting others across the financial sector to join. So with that, I will hand back over, but again, really encourage those of you to join Race to Zero, but also alongside that, making sure that in order to achieve this just transition, it's about joining Race to Resilience as well. And for those of you with a more finance focus, to join Defense Alliance.
Thank you so much, Fiona, and thank you, Tom. And also thanks Kun Dan and Kun Mo, the earlier two speakers. In the interest of time, we may have to really shorten the Q&A session, so maybe just 1 or 2 questions. And also, many questions have already been answered in the Q&A box. So let me browse quickly if there's anything that that might be of interest that haven't been already answered. Or Kun Dan, actually, I think it looks like you want to respond to some question. Did you see any question that you'd like to respond in the chat box?
Oh, I'd already texted a response to the question.
Oh, great, thank you. And Kun Mo, I think you've gathered a lot of new customers here today, right? I see a lot of positive chat messages about your business. So congratulations, and I'll soon become your customer. On the CDP and for Fiona, let's see if there's any further question. Let's see. Kun Pui Krap, Kun Tanya, do you see any other questions that we should raise during this Q&A session? Or most of them have been answered. Some of them are being typed, you know, Kun Jens kindly helping to type the answer as we speak for some of those questions. There's one question from the floor. Do all Race to Zero initiatives require the science-based targets, or can other targets be considered instead? So I guess this is a question for Fiona.
Yes, thank you. So I'll just take a step back actually and go back to the independent expert peer review group. So this group was set up to make sure that commitments being made are consistent in terms of robustness and standard across different actor types. So whilst we strongly encourage and in fact require for most businesses to sign specifically the science-based targets or science-based targets with capital letters based on the Science-Based Targets Initiative and Business Ambition for 1.5 campaign, it is not a strict requirement across all entities that join Race to Zero, because the independent expert peer review group is devised to make sure that, for example, partner initiatives like Cities Race to Zero or the Universities Race to Zero for colleges and universities are matching and developing their own methodologies that are very aligned with science-based targets in capitals, but are themselves science-based, but not necessarily directly related to the Science-Based Targets Initiative.
Thank you, Fiona. And I think just one last question. I think this is maybe for Tom. Oops. Okay, actually, this question should have been brought up at the very beginning of this session, this entire webinar, actually. What is the difference between the terms net zero emission, carbon neutral, or carbon neutrality? So Tom, I think this is like, everyone wants to know this, right?
It's a tough question to end with. Yeah, I mean, there are different ways of defining it. So basically, essentially, climate neutrality can be claimed now, and carbon neutrality being claimed now. What the world needs to get to as close to zero emissions as possible by 2050. In the science-based target definition of net zero, we're looking for companies to reduce absolute emissions in line with science as fast as possible, and not to substitute offsetting or carbon removal in it instead of absolute emissions reductions. So the definition we're using is essentially, on your journey to net zero, focus first on absolute emissions reductions. If you want to do more than that on your journey to net zero, that is definitely possible, but it should not be instead of absolute emissions reductions. Ideally, at a state of net zero, your absolute emissions reductions as a company will be reduced as far as possible. Some companies will have a larger amount of residual emissions. Some will have a small amount, kind of ideally less than 5%, and that 5% of the state of net zero or less can be have used carbon removal offsetting to balance that. But right now we want to avoid kind of this current situation where lots of companies claim net zero via current offsetting or plan to use offsetting instead of absolute emissions reduction, and that is not the way to reduce global emissions as fast as possible. So it's something that is tackled also in the SBTi net zero guidance document on the website, where I posted a link if you want to have more details on the real nitty-gritty of that question, the different definitions.
Thank you, Tom. And unfortunately, I think we have to wrap up the Q&A session. And thank you to all the speakers who have been typing away, answering some of these questions so far. If there are any unanswered questions, we'll also forward them to our speakers afterward and post the questions and answers on the website. And I would like to thank all the panelists very much for your time and expertise. We do really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And finally, we come to the really last section of the webinar. Kun Marisa Panyachiwa, the Partnership and Development Finance Officer from the UN Resident Coordinator's Office, will provide a closing remark, followed by a wrap-up by Kun Tanyaporn Krititayawut, the Executive Director of Global Compact Network Thailand. So, Kun Marisa, krab.
Thank you. On behalf of the United Nations and the co-organizers, thank you to all the panelists for giving us invaluable insight to the challenges of climate change and for providing us not only with the resources to take action, but the inspiration to do better. I would also like to thank all participants for your active engagement and your good questions. As we close this session, I would like to share 3 key takeaways. First, on partnerships. As we've seen, climate change affects each and every one of us. We will not be able to achieve the ambitious goals set out in the Paris Agreement unless we all play our part. Combating climate change and reaching the Sustainable Development Goals can only be done with strong global partnerships and cooperation from all sectors. The solution will require action from all of us together. My second key takeaway is that embedding sustainable development in business is not something that is just nice to have, but is actually necessary for long-term business success. By treating sustainability as a business objective, this strategy then creates value for society and the environment through the core activities of the company. We see that green investments truly present a growth opportunity for businesses. My third and last key takeaway is that businesses are our leaders. Businesses can make a huge impact towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. The private sector in Thailand is leading the way with companies already setting ambitious climate targets. I'm so inspired by the good work that NRF and Happy Grocers shared with us today, and I hope you too have been inspired to go back and see how you can transform your business and how you can take action. Today might have been the beginning of a dialogue with the private sector in Thailand on transformative change in our businesses, but it's certainly not the last. We look forward to keeping this dialogue going as we prepare for the upcoming high-level GCNT forum in October, where private sector will lead the way in exploring solutions to climate change in a multi-stakeholder setting. Thank you all again for your active participation, and I look forward to seeing you again as we all join the race to zero. Thank you.
And on behalf of the organizing team, we are the Global Compact
Network Thailand with the participants and also the partnership with the United Nations Residence Coordinator Office in Bangkok, with the UNFCCC Regional Coordinator and Collaboration Team in Bangkok. We also very thankful for the high-level champions and the co-hosts of the technical session today to build the capacity for the Thai business to take the ambition on climate action together. With special thank you to Kun Nopadon, Kun Gita, Kun Jens, and all speakers, Daniel from UNFCCC, Fiona from the Race to Zero campaign, and Emma from the Science-Based Target Initiative, and Tom from the Business Ambition 1.5. And of course, with our business leader who has a high ambition, like Kun Dan from NRF and Kun Mo from Happy Coursers. This webinar on the Race to Zero, Meet the World's Race to Zero Hero for the climate action is the first of the Thailand meeting with the world experts to learn the best practice with the business opportunities. On this climate action, we hope that today's session will help you to set the scene and provide the Thai business with the necessary support to you and the resource for the future to make the ambition commitment to the joining of the Race to Zero campaign. And our initiative, we would like to carry on together with you. We want you to cooperate and work together with your company to taking the rigorous climate action together with the Global Compact local network in Thailand. We will have the GCNT annual forum very soon, upcoming in October 21. With the GCNT, we have a very good intention together with all of you to support and bring together the think tanks and innovation to bring the knowledge and attitude toward the leading of this response climate change. As part of this, we are moving together to implement the phase of the Paris Agreement into the action and strive to be the net zero as a resilience as soon as possible. To take the immediate action together, we have a short-term plan and also start with the decisive decade together. You can get more information and opportunity to take the action together, including the innovative thinking with the relevant initiative, international tools that you can choose together. In this moment, it's time for action. We would like to invite you, business people, to apply the membership of the United Nations Global Compact, and you can become the creator of the livability future. For our next generation, it starts from the business now. And today you can apply for our member at the QR code that you can see on the screen now. And you can see our Global Compact Network website display on your screen. Please join us and start with yourself. It's your opportunity to transform our business together to accelerate the sustainable transition for 1.5 degrees Celsius climate resilience and a healthy future. And we need everyone on board. The private sector now, we are being a key lever to transform our economy and society. Lastly, you can share your thinking from this session and also show your interest, which are the climate action you are working on. Please do a short survey. We are now showing on the screen that you are answering. There are next 4 questions on the poll. Please select your answer on the most interesting you have. And we will bring this answer and show the answer together on the website that we are having. Please just click and then we will gathering all the answer for the next session. Your input as a survey will help us shaping the climate action in Thailand together. And thank you very much. We will leave the poll for a few seconds. You will see which are the topics that people have most interest. And there are 4 questions together. After the poll finish, we are waiting for getting more information from yours. And thank you that right now we have almost 300 participants that answering the poll. Thank you so much. Right now we are about 100% answers the poll. At the end of the session, please enjoy the recording of the videos we are showing at the beginning again. This is a corporate video of the Global Compact the United Nations Global Compact, we are acting together with the business people to shaping up the climate action and sustainability world. Please enjoy video at the end. And if there are any inquiry and question, please revisit our website. We will show the QR code for you to take a look and join us at the Global Compact Network Thailand website. Thank you.
As a human family, we've had an enormous wake-up call to how connected we are with a tiny little virus that comes along and shuts us down.
We all live in this world together. The same blood flows in me and any other person.
We're facing the challenges of an ecosystem that is stressed.
Things are not moving as fast as they should. Things are improving, but not as fast as they should.
The challenges that we are facing, they are materializing so fast that it's not only my children or grandchildren which will experience the consequences if we fail.
To do it, we need to do it together. Collaboration, north, south, east, west, black, brown, white. Strength in the diversity of the human family is what we need right now to get us past this incredibly difficult time. Might sound like it's impossible, but that's what we work towards, making the impossible possible.
20 years ago, a small group of United Nations and business leaders came up with a visionary proposal.
I propose that you, the business leaders here gathered in Davos, and we, the United Nations, initiate a global compact of shared values and principles which will give a human face to the global market.
I always say part of Kofi Annan's genius was he invited business, but he also addressed civil society and labor organizations.
The mission of the United Nations Global Compact is to mobilize companies around the world to align their operations and strategies with 10 universal principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption.
The UN represents the body that aims to drive international cooperation and drive peace and security for humanity. And I think it unifies all of society around this set of 17 goals.
Our objectives cannot be met if the private sector doesn't play a fundamental role. And so the Global Compact is a platform in which all those businesses that abide by the principles of, and values of the United Nations and of the Charter to work together, representing the best of humankind.
For the last 2 decades, the initiative has grown to encompass local networks in more than 60 countries, engaging directly with over 10,000 companies.
The local networks are our global footprint around the world, and they work with us to translate the 10 principles as well as the Sustainable Development Goals into actionable pieces of work for businesses globally.
It is so decided.
Since 2015, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement have provided the most powerful common agenda that the world has ever seen, with an essential role spelled out for business.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
Any business that continues to operate under its own self-interest will not be around very long. So businesses that have a strong purpose, that understand how they can make society better, will be embraced by society and will be around for a long time.
Be the change that you want to see in business.
I truly believe that companies who do not put sustainability, the SDGs, in their strategies, they're going to disappear.
The mindset of consumers has changed. They increasingly want to buy from companies that are contributing to society as a whole.
Business must be part of the solution in when we address these big global problems.
The focus has shifted to both the short term and the long term, both doing well and doing good. Making profits and making a change. This is a reality of the world now. Leaders need to lead sustainably.
The United Nations Global Compact is leading the transformation ahead, challenging companies to take more ambitious action on the Sustainable Development Goals.
I think it's absolutely impossible to face the challenges of today, the very quick change that is happening, without having the youth leading the way and helping us define the right strategies, the right policies, the right approaches to address the global problems.
The world is waking up, and change is coming whether you like it or not. Climate justice!
The world today has got more opportunities than it has the challenges that can be overcome by the opportunities that we have.
You find people in the most desperate of situations, determined to fight for a better future. That's the kind of world I want.
What have changed in a very short period of time is that the narrative is different, and that is fantastic.
If you want to have a good business, you have to mobilize people. A business is a sum of people working to something.
More and more people realize that sustainability is really about making the pie bigger, better, and more inclusive.
I hope in the future all businesses in the world will think about their own purpose. Business can only exist when they have a purpose.
We've got to show progress. We've got to reverse what's happening.
I see the Global Compact as an incredible organization working together with businesses to build a more sustainable world.
We are united across the globe, for the globe. We're united despite our challenges, no matter how daunting the task may seem. We are united by possibilities because this is bigger than one business, because we are better together. We all have the same job. We are united in the business of a better world.